Scott Talley here, once again from the worldwide headquarters of Network in Action. We're fortunate to have a visitor. Had to drive from the Woodlands, Texas, get his passport stamped and all that good stuff. Mr. Lewis Walker with Remax Carlton Woods. Welcome. Glad you're here today.
Thank you. Thanks, Scott.
Let's jump in. We got a cool topic. Love real estate. We're going to talk a little bit different niche, more about investment real estate. So tell me how you got started, how long you've been at it.
I've been in the real estate business for over 40 years. Been in the Woodlands area almost since its inception. I think the population was probably 3,500 people there. Yes. Well, and 3,500 maybe others.
Yeah. Wow. So you've seen it just below. My gosh, it's like incredible. It's grown incredibly, and what we're about to see is absolutely amazing. Really, even more so. Wow. Yeah, I know it's they're in Conroe. I'm from Houston. I keep saying I can't believe Conroe is one of the fastest growing areas of the country. Well, so obviously when you got into real estate, did you jump in on residential real estate first?
I did. I was in a small town before I was in the Woodlands, and pretty well had to do everything.
Yeah.
Residential, small commercial, farm ranch, timberland. Sold a few chickens. You know.
Whatever you got to do to get by, right? Literally, to eat what you kill.
Yeah.
So you moved into more investment type real estate, right?
I've always kind of had that tilt in my business. So when I was predominantly residential, the bulk of my clients were investors.
Okay. So that led to more of just a whole program around that. So I've heard of the term sort of a fee development.
Right.
And that's a niche you're in. Tell me about what that means and what it is.
It depends on who you ask and what that means. So a lot of engineering companies that do civil engineering work, they will do what they call is fee development. So they'll arrange for the infrastructure to go in and maintain it, coordinate between the construction guys that do the utilities and the roads and everything, and they'll charge a fee for fee development. That's the most common reference to that. Mine kind of goes beyond, where we go find a piece of land or someone brings us a piece of land. We'll determine the highest use. Then we'll seek out the client, investor that wants to do a development and take it all the way through the conceptual, civil engineering, land planning, civil engineering, help coordinate between all the parties with the installation of the infrastructure, and then if they're going to go vertical on it, work with architects, design people, and all the way through marketing, sales or leasing or both.
That's a long way from a residential realtor.
Well, the typical transaction in a residential real estate thing is 30 to 120 days. We're talking about 2 to 5 years or longer.
Wow. So if I came to you tomorrow with a piece of land that I inherited from my family, you're going to first help me sort of figure out what's the highest and best use.
Right.
Which is going to give me the best return on my capital.
Correct.
And then we're going to set out to have partners maybe come into it.
Right. So you kind of determine at that point how involved you want to be in the rest of the process. Are you a seller? Or do you want to be involved in a development process? And if so, at what point do you want to exit out? So some of my investors want to get the land developed and then before it goes vertical, step out of the picture.
So they can do another one.
Right.
And then you're involved with different architects. You're talking about utilities,
yes.
Working with the county, the
right.
city. How difficult is it to
Well, I coordinate the efforts. So we have people that specialize in, say, land planning, the civil engineering part, getting the permits for drainage and detention, working with the highway department for curb cut. All those aspects. I have a team of people. So the benefit to using me is my client talks to one person, I coordinate it all, and we take it from there.
It's a massive undertaking. And so if I had this piece of land you mentioned, to bring it to where it's ready for construction, what am I looking at usually? Is it a year and a half or 2 years you mentioned?
It depends on the jurisdictions.
Yeah.
So usually I'd say to get the engineering and the permits and really before you could start the infrastructure, it's somewhere between 10 and 18 months.
Yeah. And there's a ton that goes into that, right?
Oh,
especially
sure.
Nowadays with our recent history of flooding, it's gotten more
Right.
complicated and difficult. And you actually need more land, don't you? Don't you have to prepare if you've got...
It depends on the land itself. So I've had parcels that were as flat as this tabletop that just didn't make sense because the detention, there was no outfall for the detention. And then where are you going to put the detention? And so if the land has a little contour, it makes it easier.
So without getting into too much specifics, like how do you get paid?
Okay.
Or how does that work?
So it does vary a little bit. The ideal scenario is I have enough confidence in the project so that I get paid on the back end. Have enough confidence in the project and the client that I defer mine till the back end. As I was talking about civil engineering firms, I'm not an engineer. I hire them, but they'll typically charge between 3 and 5% on top of their engineering to do fee development. So I charge a higher rate on the back end in the marketing side of it to compensate for the fee development.
Got you. So you're going to help make sure that this project has its highest and best use. You're then going to get it to the city through your other contacts. And
right.
You're going to get involved with the architect and see it built, and then you're going to have your fee.
Correct.
That's a great deal for the buyer, the investor.
It is. It forces me to have skin in the game.
Yeah. So every once in a while you'll drive by a project and it's just been sitting there for years. Tell us a couple of horror stories when people didn't hire someone like you.
Well,
we don't need to name any names.
Yeah. So I have you actually visited a project I did at Rayford Office
Love
Park.
that place. Love it.
So a good friend of mine, an associate, put in a 27-acre business park. And at the time when that was really on the outskirts to nowhere, it's a different world today. And he had one tract that was 9 acres that was a little bit large for the end user. And it had some limitations, which made it a little bit too small to go in and chop up into smaller parcels and sell. 12 years after trying to market that as a 9-acre tract, I had another client that came in and bought it from him, put a road down the middle, put it in 4 parcels. We had it sold in 6 months. Wow. Surprisingly, one buyer bought 3 tracts, and that's now the Rayford Office Park. The other part was bought by another client of mine, and we did a build-to-suit for a weight loss doctor that's been in the area for over 20 years. He'll build 2 more buildings there. So at the end of the day, we're going to have over 240 people working on that site on a daily basis.
Wow, that sat there vacant for years.
Right.
So what is an acceptable project to you? What do you look for?
I like that particular project. I'm going to give that as an example, even though it's a real small one, because I represented the original seller. I had a client that came in, bought it, sold it for him. I represent the 2 people that came in. There is in Rayford Office Park, we have 48,000 square feet that is fully leased or sold. When we developed it, we took it a step further and formed a condominium development. So I coordinated that with the attorneys on the declarations so we could sell or lease individual units. We have another 36,000 square feet in shell buildings that we will have leased or sold by the end of the year. So that project we took from concept to land plan to civil engineering to architectural to marketing to development of the condominium regime and there to market it. The beauty about leasing as opposed to sales, we still have the product at a higher value. So at some of those, we decided to sell as net leased properties.
Describe that to the audience. I'm familiar with it, but just
Okay.
people who are familiar with a net lease.
So
It's attractive.
we put a tenant in there. We put them in for a minimum of 5 years. We have some that are longer. And then it's generating an income. And then we sell that as a passive income vehicle to an investor where they buy the property. They enjoy that passive income, usually on the short-term leases. 5 is a short-term commercial lease. That's going to be somewhere around 8.5% return. We call that capitalization rate, which is a lot better than they can make somewhere else. The tenant is responsible for all the operating costs like taxes, insurance, condo fees, management fees. We manage the property while it's tenant occupied, and we manage the association. So I say we, my office. So it's a very attractive picture for them. So some of these projects that we'll be talking about, we do build to suits. We get the income stabilized and maximized, and then pass it over to the person that wants to be just totally passive, doesn't want to be involved in the development structure, and wants to enjoy a low maintenance property that is subject to appreciation with good tax benefits.
So with all these balls in the air, I keep thinking about how different this must have been from your early days of residential real estate. When was the last time you did just a simple little buy or sell on a real estate home?
It's
Been a while.
I have a residential real estate company that I'm a partner in, but
Okay.
I'm not really involved in the in the brokerage.
So
there.
go through the steps a little bit for us here of what's involved.
Well, again, finding that attractive piece of land, and I use a basic 5-point rule to determine if the land's usable for basically any need before I try to define the need. Does it have good drainage? What would the detention requirements be if it was fully developed? What the utilities are? If it's on a road that's controlled by TxDOT, are they going to allow us to have a curb cut? Now, that's a horror story. I've seen people buy properties and then realize, oh no, I can't get a curb cut. There's no way in. So that's a nightmare. Fortunately, I haven't been involved in one of those, but I've had to clean them up.
Yeah.
And then lastly, we talk about detention, drainage, utilities, the curb cut, and what's the area surrounding it, and will it support what use? So those are my first 5 questions I walk into a situation with.
And experience must play an enormous part, not only in you having been in the Woodlands since it was population.
Yeah.
What's the population now? It's gone from 35,000 to.
It's like 120 something. But the Woodlands is not a bedroom community like a lot of the developments that surround Houston. It actually has more jobs than it has households.
Wow.
And that's increasing daily. I mean, almost every day there's a new announcement of someone coming to town
Yeah.
or expanding their presence, like Shell is with their Anadarko purchase.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy, the growth out there. So obviously with so many moving parts and so much at stake and so much at risk, you've got to have some business partners. Tell me about that.
Yes. So I do have to limit the number of these that I'm involved in at a time. So I try to add one a year.
Okay.
And in the last 5 years, I've been involved in 7, some smaller, as small as a 12,000 square foot retail center. But yes, since I've been in the Woodlands a long time, I know the local landowners, and there are people I know that have been acquiring land for decades. And when we talk about the Woodlands, I'm talking about the fringe areas, what's outside the Woodlands. It's the individual investors are not going to get in the door over there. Mm-hmm. So the Woodlands has such a their MO is to first develop, stabilize, maximize the income, and then sell the asset. So they do it on a much larger scale. So my projects are typically $10 to $40 million, and that's real small. I mean, from purchase to disposition.
Are you still looking for investors?
I am. So I have a number of people that I've worked with for over 20 years that are the constant team and players. And but yes, I'm certainly looking for investors to join us in projects. I have some large tracts of land that I probably need to sell in 3 or 4 parts for different uses. And there's good opportunities for people that want to step in and do that.
So how do you identify, future projects?
Usually it's someone I know that brings a piece of land to me and says, "What do you think about this?
I know you're the expert,
what can we do with this?" And most of those are real estate brokers in the area that I've worked with for a number of years.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So you've probably seen some horror stories along the way. Tell us about one. People always like to know about.
There's the one where the guy bought land on 2978 to build a garage condo project, and then realized he hadn't done his diligence and didn't have a curb cut,
an entrance.
Or, my life is not without complications. The biggest issues are utilities. So I had one project where we built a building for a doctor. CenterPoint didn't bring the utilities in until 9 months later.
Oh my gosh.
Sorry, CenterPoint, but it was.
Truth hurts.
Yeah. So we sat there vacant waiting for them to bring it in. They had lost the easement.
Wow.
So.
And you couldn't discover that in due diligence, or somehow just got past you?
They eventually found it, showed up, and put poles in the ground and strung it up, and now it's a very successful project.
I've got a quick story near my home. There was a famous liquor store. I won't name any names because I'm friends with the owner, but they put in a liquor store, and depending on who you believe, they either put it in too close to a school and the TABC didn't recognize it, or they weren't selling as much food as they represented, and it became more of a liquor store. Bottom line is it became extremely litigious, and they had to close the location, much to my chagrin, because it was close to the house. But you got to do your due diligence. Well, there's a ton going on, obviously, in your life, and a ton of experience, and I really appreciate the education. Yeah. Tell the audience how they reach you by phone or email.
Lewis Walker. Office is 281-747-6334. And my email is lewis@txglocal.com. Now that's TX local, not global. So you'll probably get it better if English is not your first language. But it's local. We have local properties, and we serve a global market.
That's awesome. You've obviously done a bunch of networking, like we were talking earlier about.
Yeah.
You've been in networking for 10 or 12 years. How's your experience with network and action been, and how's it been different?
I like it because there is more cross action, and I don't know if that's your model or that's just how Stacy does it, but we have the 4 groups. I think she has 5 now, and we actually have things that we do together, like lunches and breakfast, so forth. The team building exercises are really good to get to know people. Yeah. I enjoy that, and it's just a different sphere of influence than what I normally see. Is why I got into the network situation to begin with, is because you get to learn, you get to meet new people, and people that are just coming to town that want exposure, and people that have been there a long time. So, with my business being helping business people with their facilities, it's a perfect fit.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. We're really grateful you came in, Lewis.
Yeah.
If you have a chance, if you're anywhere near the Woodlands, I really recommend you stop by the office park. Give them the address there on Rayford Sawdust.
It's Rayford Office Park. It's 1310 Rayford Park,
and it's just a beautiful co-working space.
Well,
the best way to describe
there is a building in there out of the 7 buildings that is a co-working facility,
and that's one that I was familiar with.
And then on at the opposite end of the Woodlands, I have the offices at Dry Creek, which is an office condominium project.
Very nice.
And
awesome. Well, we're really glad you came in today. Thank you
for
sharing your expertise with us.
All right.